Hello guys.
Hello.
Welcome to the vlog.
Welcome to the vlog. Today's vlog is going to be a bit more like a sit-down style video, not really a vlog, but we wanted to share our story with, it's just more of Grayson's birth story essentially.
It's a boy as advertised.
How gestational diabetes now, besides the labor, affected my baby. I think they called it an SNS. Olive Trevor put like a picture of it, kept checking his numbers, and they seem to be going down.
This, like he has to drink almost all this, otherwise his numbers won't be up.
We had a stressful night, to say the least. So, if you guys are new here, we are Trevor and Danielle.
Hello.
And we just had a baby a month ago. He's 5 weeks actually today. So we have a lot of stories we've been sharing about that experience and whatnot. So if you haven't seen our birth vlog, that would actually be where I'd recommend starting, because that tells his story, like it's like the vlog of his birth. Today's the day we are going to have a baby. We're supposed to be here at 7. We had some issues with his heart rate going down. I've already let the idea of C-section sink in though, so.
It's a boy as advertised. Alright.
But then there's so much more that we didn't tell because there was just a lot that happened. If you watch the vlog, you kind of might have got that feeling that we like left some stuff out and just kind of like made it like this happy-go-lucky experience when it really wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
There was a lot.
Yeah, and so we're gonna have a couple more videos kind of filling in some of the stuff that we left out.
Well, and also I wanted the birth vlog to like be something that we could rewatch that was like this happy thing of like Grayson's birth, and like in the future we can watch Grayson's birth, but like I still wanted to tell the story of everything that happened.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because we want to share with you all of the bad stuff as well as the good stuff. We don't want you to think like, oh, everything was great and everything was wonderful, because not everything was and not everything is, and you know, we want to tell the story of what we went through
really like.
and what it's really like, because it's not all rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we should also preface this by saying that while we tell all these stories and recount our experiences, just know that we're definitely not doctors. No. We're just saying what happened to us to the best of our knowledge and our ability, and to the best that we can remember it. So if you have gestational diabetes or you relate to something that we're talking about in these videos, be sure to talk to your doctor first and don't take our word as like fact, because it's going to be different for everyone, and honestly we might mess some of it up or tell you guys something a little bit wrong just because we're misremembering or misunderstood something. But this is our story and how we feel about it, but just know that we are not doctors, we're not experts in this at all. So let's first start off with Grayson's first story. Just a quick little background if you haven't seen the vlog. I had gestational diabetes, so I was induced before 40 weeks. I was like, I don't know exactly how far I was because they kept changing my due date and like kept changing how far along I was. So I just know they wouldn't let me go over 40 weeks. So we wound up going in for an induction on a Thursday and started the process of that. So the first thing they did as soon as they got there was get me all hooked up to everything. And one thing that I don't think we talked about in the birth vlog was that as soon as they hooked me up to the monitors, they noticed his heart rate was dropping because I was having little Braxton Hicks contractions, and every time that would happen, his heart rate would drop. You can probably hear baby's heart rate in the background because that's a big update we have for you. We had some issues with his heart rate going down, so I'm being like almost constantly monitored now. So that concerned them a little bit, but they still went on with the induction. The first thing they did was the Folly balloon, which is just basically a balloon they put up inside me, and like it pumps up on either side of, I think, my uterus, and then it's supposed to help like flatten it and expand it to what would get me to like a 4 centimeters is what they're trying to do. Right. So they put that in, and as soon as they put that in, I started bleeding, and it like wouldn't stay in or wouldn't go in or something. So the Folly balloon was like scratched. They decided they weren't going to do that anymore. Then they did some sort of pill up inside me. So still not started on Pitocin or anything like that. They put some sort of like pill or something in there to get contractions going, and we waited like, was it 2 hours?
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then they came back and it was supposed to kind of start thinning you out, but then when they checked again, you were basically the same as you were before. And so they were like, well, that's not working. So the next step is to do, what was
Pitocin.
Was it Pitocin?
I think so, yeah.
But because of the way his numbers were going as far as his heartbeats and heart rate, they were a little worried about starting Pitocin until they stabilized. So we waited it was like 4 hours or something maybe?
I feel like we sat around kind of doing nothing for like the longest time.
So we've been here for a little while. Trevor's over there.
I'm not remembering it perfectly clearly, but I know that we waited around a lot. And
because we went in at 6 a.m. and we didn't start doing anything like crazy until like 2 or 3 o'clock.
Yeah, we'd already had, so I kind of knew something was up because our doctor was coming and going, and he had mentioned a C-section, knowing I did not at all want a C-section. Like we pushed, like I basically said, like I really don't want a C-section before we even talked about like an induction date. So these are like many doctor's appointments ago. And my doctor knew it was really important to me not have a C-section. However, he'd already started talking to me about it. So I knew that like things weren't going to plan or the way that they were supposed to be going.
Yeah, he came in at 2 o'clock when things kind of started getting hairy. They kept saying like, you're still 2 centimeters, you've been here for...
I wasn't progressing.
You've been here for like 8 hours, 10 hours, you're not progressing with anything we've given you.
All it's doing is hurting his heart rate, like affecting his heart rate.
And we're worried that it's going to be too much stress to try to get you to push this out because we'll be doing this all night and his heart rate is still not stabilized to where they want it is. So he kind of came in and talked about it, which I think actually ended up like looking back at it was a good idea because you freaked out, you started crying.
I cried. We thought about it for a while though. We talked about it.
Yes.
It was good that he talked to me about it early on.
Yes.
It just was not what I wanted to hear at all. So like I cried. The anesthesiologist actually came in and talked to me and got pre-consent for like everything. So that's when like we really knew that I'm pretty sure we're having a C-section because the doctors talked about it. The anesthesiologist has already come in and given us his spiel, all that kind of stuff. So I was like settling with the idea, but I really still didn't want to. However, it was getting to the point where it just seemed like we didn't really have any other options. Finally, the doctor came in at like probably like what, like 5 o'clock? Because what time was he born? I
think it was 6:42 or something.
Something like that. So I think it must have been like 5 o'clock, 5:30. The doctor came in and basically said, you have to have a C-section. Like I always had a choice.
Right.
It was
and they checked you then and you were still at 2 centimeters. So you literally really gone nowhere all day. And
all day the nurses kept running into our room because his heart rate would drop. So they'd run into the room and then they'd stare at the monitor for like ever and watch his heart rate go down and come back up. And I knew the nurses were worried, and then the doctor would come in and tell us about C-section. So we just wound up having one.
Yeah, and to kind of talk about the heart rate dropping, they said it's fine to drop. It's supposed to when you have contractions, but it's supposed to come up at a normal level within like a minute of it doing so. And his were longer than a minute, so that's what made them worried.
Something like that.
Because they did tell us that, his heart rate will drop and go up more than like the base number because of the contraction, but he should stabilize it within a minute or so or 2 of it going down. But his was going down for like 3-4 minutes, and then Pitocin made that worse, and so it was kind of at the point where
labor wasn't going to happen, natural labor.
And it was kind of just decided that we would have a C-section.
So after that, we mentioned in our birth vlog, things started happening really fast. If you want to see like the process of the C-section and everything like that, I won't really talk about it here because we're going to have a whole video all about what it's like to have an unplanned C-section. So we'll talk about that later. But we had a C-section, our baby boy was born, and now you guys are caught up. But we do want to talk about how gestational diabetes now, besides the labor, affected my baby and what happened with him after he was born. So gestational diabetes, we've done a few videos about those throughout my pregnancy process and everything like that, and like what that did for me and what that means. Basically, it's diabetes that you only have while you're pregnant. And as far as the baby goes, he's fine throughout the pregnancy. I mean, having irregular numbers is not great. So the whole process of like being pregnant, I'm trying to like regulate those numbers. And then when he was born, they have to check his sugar numbers to make sure that he's regulating himself okay, because I was not regulated properly, which means when he's like inside me, he's not being regulated properly. And so when he comes out, how his little body handles that is what they were worried about.
Yeah, because you make insulin to keep your numbers down low, so you were making insulin for him.
A lot of it.
Yes, and now when he comes out, he has to do it himself. He doesn't have anybody doing it for him, which means his body doesn't know yet how to do it, and so that's why they're checking his numbers to make sure that his body was doing what it should on keeping his numbers where they need to be.
Yes. So when he first was born, they pricked his heel, which is how they checked his sugar numbers, and he was fine. It wasn't until the next day, during the day, that they kept checking his numbers and they seemed to be going down. So he was, isn't it called like hypoglycemic?
Maybe. Sure.
We don't know exactly what it's called, but anyways, he had low sugar. So this makes him sleepy, which labor in general makes him sleepy. And the way that you resolve it is usually just by feeding him. However, because he's sleepy, he doesn't want to eat. Because I'm a first-time mom, never breastfed before, eating was kind of a struggle as well. And then also with him being a C-section baby, he was full of all this fluid that normally gets like squished out when a baby goes through your vaginal canal. Like it squishes out all of this fluid and mucus inside them, but because he's born C-section, he had a bunch of fluid in him. So but because he's a C-section baby, he had a bunch of fluid in him, which made him feel full. So he had no interest in eating. Right. And that was kind of the resolution that they wanted, was just to feed him. And that gets his numbers to regulate somehow.
Yes, because you put more food in him and his sugars are going to go up.
Yeah.
Just like us, the more you eat, the higher your number of sugars is going to go up, and then your body produces insulin to keep it down. But his body was producing basically too much insulin for what he was eating, because he's a newborn, he barely eats anything, and because, you know, you're a new mom, I mean, you're only producing very little. So
this rest of the story is where things get kind of blurry, and you'll notice as we continue to talk about it, our memory of everything is like a little bit wishy-washy, because this was super stressful. We're new parents, we've never had a baby before, and we're dealing with something decently stressful. They started pricking his heel every 2 hours, which he hated. They would come in and just touch his foot and he would instantly start crying. So that hurt my little mommy heart. And then they started telling us we had to feed him every 2 hours 30 milliliters. Yes. So we started actually with a bottle, and this really worried me because I'd already not been allowed to have the vaginal birth I had imagined. Now I wanted to breastfeed. It was another huge goal of mine, and they started giving him a bottle. So I was suddenly worried that my milk wouldn't come in, or I wouldn't be able to get him to successfully breastfeed any longer. So I didn't want to give him a bottle, but he needed it in order to keep his numbers up.
Yes, and to kind of explain, I think they said that when he's born, he should be able to handle like 10 milliliters.
He's got a little tummy.
Right, and so we were like stretching his stomach every 2 hours, putting 30 milliliters in.
It was miserable, and I don't remember. But my whole experience of it is awful, but maybe it wasn't as bad as like I feel like it was, but like looking back, all I think is awfulness.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just a lot because this is the first time you've ever done it. You have no idea what you're doing. We have no idea what we're doing. We're getting told by the nurses, which they did really good.
Yeah.
We're getting told by them, like, no, you have to feed him this. Like, he has to drink almost all this, otherwise his numbers won't be up. It takes an hour to feed.
Yeah, because he didn't want to eat that much.
And then he would sleep for an hour. We'd have to wake him back up and then feed him another hour to feed. And and every 2 hours he's getting his heel pricked, so he's not happy.
Yeah.
That was sleeping throughout the night. It was like during the day, and then through that whole night it was the same exact thing.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Are you telling me it's okay? You saying it's okay, Mama? Yeah. I forgive you, Mama. Oh. Oh. Bless you. You want more food? Okay. Let's give it a shot.
Our doctor came in actually that night and told us that if we didn't get his numbers up and regulated, we would have to see a specialist or go to a bigger hospital, which is where the specialist was that I was seeing throughout my whole pregnancy. And so it was a hospital like an hour and a half away. We'd probably have to go in an ambulance, and it was just this whole thing, and I did not want to get transferred. I was so scared of that possibility. So we were so stressed that second night of his life, basically, trying to feed him and get everything under control. We had a stressful night, to say the least. I cried a lot. Not only am I just like going through postpartum stuff, I'm now dealing with this stress. I just had a C-section, so I'm physically healing and hurting, and all of this is like not how I imagined anything to go. Like,
right.
I never imagined having a C-section. And now we're dealing with the stresses of what we were told could happen, but like you just don't understand what it is until like you're in the thick of it.
Right.
One thing that we didn't mention about when we were like force feeding him was, because I didn't want to do a bottle, we started using a little thing called, I think they called it an SNS. Olive Trevor put like a picture of it right here. And essentially what that was is I could breastfeed him, and then we would put this little tube like on my nipple that he would also be sucking on, that would be like dripping formula into his mouth. So he's not getting just breast milk, but we're not like breaking that like breastfeeding established like thing with like by giving him a bottle. So we did one bottle, and then I don't think we did a bottle again. We just did that. And so for someone who's never breastfed before, it was super hard enough to learn to breastfeed, let alone forcing this baby who's not super hungry to breastfeed, and also making sure that this tube got into his mouth and that was like properly feeding him as well.
Yes.
Long story short, we made it through the night.
Yes, we made it through the night, and then at the 24-hour mark of him being alive, the number actually went from 50 to 60, so we had to start hitting the number of 60 or more. And so then that was a stressful thing too, because not only was he barely hitting the numbers of 50, now he has to hit the numbers of 60, and he pulled through though.
Yeah.
He did it.
It was definitely stressful. I can't even explain to you like the amount of relief when our doctor came in the morning and was like, hey, you did okay through the night, your numbers are fine, we're not gonna transfer you. Like that like weight lifted off me was so great. They switched from checking his sugars every 2 hours to probably like every 6 hours, and this is now Saturday, so we went in and got induced on Thursday. Saturday we were told we were mostly in the clear. We stayed for that extra day. We could have got him circumcised on Saturday, but they chose not to because we just already had such a stressful night.
And they're worried about him not feeding after that.
Yes.
Because usually he's cranky and doesn't want to feed, and we need him to still feed.
To
we
continue to
those
eat.
numbers up.
Yeah. So we postponed his circumcision until Sunday, and then as soon as he was cleared after that, we were finally able to go home.
Yes, and then the biggest thing about it was, after 48 hours is usually the window, like the first 48 hours of his life is the window of where they worry about his blood sugars being off and not regulating. After 48 hours, they say that usually they regulated.
Yeah.
And at about, there was the second day when he got like 1 or 2 low readings in the 60s, and then he was up in the 70s and stuff like that. So it was a lot better the rest of the time, and then they were like, yeah, he's good, he's regulating everything fine, like you guys are good to go. And then at 48 hours he was basically released from the heel pricks and anything like that.
Yeah, and they did mention to us that this isn't necessarily something like, because I was worried we'd have to go home, and if we didn't like feed him like every 3 hours like they recommend, he would have like low sugar or something. They said that's not something you have to worry about. After like the first 48 hours and the baby's body like figures it out, it's not something that he's gonna like live with or anything like that. Like it doesn't even cross our mind anymore. Right. It's just something that happened right after delivery. To end this whole video, I just want to say that gestational diabetes sucks. But also that if you're someone who has gestational diabetes and you're watching this now, this doesn't mean that this is going to happen to you.
Correct.
Some babies are born and they handle everything fine, and our baby just didn't, and he needed a little extra help, and that help was basically just feeding him more. But it was just stressful as first-time parents.
Yes.
I think if we had to deal with this again, like with our second child or something, it would still wouldn't be great. I mean, obviously, you just want to, I just want to snuggle my baby when it's born. I don't want to have to worry about like all of these things. However, it really wouldn't be near as bad as it was this time.
Yeah, mostly just because we would know what to expect and what's going to happen next. And
yeah.
A lot of it was like, we just have, the doctor brought up that these things could happen, but it was never discussed like, well, if this happened, like he said, like, if this happens, this is what we'll do, but it was never like, you know, hey, he has to hit this exact number. If he doesn't, we have to do this and this, and it was just a lot. And because I mean, he could have been sent to another hospital and put on an IV with sugar water to basically raise his sugars.
Yeah.
And yeah, it could have been a lot worse than it really was. So I mean, it stunk to go through it, but I mean, I think we were very fortunate that we didn't have any of that problems, that he was able to regulate it on himself
with feedings.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so ultimately it wasn't part of the plan, but I mean,
it worked out.
Yeah.
And if it happened again, it wouldn't be near as bad. It's just us being unprepared and uneducated and first-time parents, because we're dealing with the stresses of just keeping a child alive at the beginning, let alone dealing with sugar issues because of gestational diabetes.
And we'll definitely have more videos about how difficult it is to keep a kid alive.
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys liked our video and want to become part of our family and see our little boy and keep up with everything going on, make sure you guys subscribe to this video, give it a big thumbs up, and follow us on Facebook. It'll all be linked in the description, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!